Let's start without wasting any time. So as Kinsley mentioned, I'll be facilitating and talking about the role of artificial intelligence in public services, accountability and governance. And then please be mindful that the governance part, my colleague Ravin is going to go in depth with it. And just be mindful of that. So just by show of hands, before I start, just by show of hands, you can leave a chat in the group chat. How many of you use public services on a daily basis? You can leave a comment in the chat group and then we'll just take it from there. And then, or you can want to speak, Kinsley will see whoever has raised their hands. But when we talk of public services, we need to think, we need to think again about who is responsible in delivering the services. So public services are your essential services that the government provides to meet basic needs of the community. And the basic needs, you know, your basic human needs are education, healthcare, public safety, including infrastructure, water and clean water and sanitation, so on and so forth. And then the government, as we all know, that it's structured through different departments. For instance, you have the executive, which will be the president and his or her ministers. And then you have the judiciary and the legislature. You know that in order for any services to be executed, they need proper planning, they need to be, we need policies in hand, we need laws need to be drafted and created. So that's the piece and puzzle of what public service is. You need to have a proper framework put in place that defines the roles, responsibilities, and processes to ensure that trust is met or that objectives are being met. So in the public service sector, for instance, I'll go with your healthcare. You know that when you go to a public healthcare or a government healthcare service, you know that there are questions that you have to answer in order for you to get a file. I want for a proper word. You open a file, and the file of yours has all your personal details, including why you want to consult with the doctor, you know, and all of that information, we know that has to be processed. And when it's processed, it means that you meet with the nurses, and then eventually leading up to meeting with the doctor. And then again, here you realize that I've also written that the accountability structure can also take form through ministers. You know that you have your minister of communications, you have your minister of health, you have your minister of agriculture, you have your minister of various essential services that the government provides for the community, as mentioned in the first slide. So like I've mentioned, that when we look at accountability, I think a lot of us may relate to the accountability structure. If you're an employee, you know that you have a different role that you play, you have responsibilities, and you have different objectives that you need to meet each and every single day or each and every single week when you go to work. And how that is processed, it's that perhaps some companies would want that every Friday or every Monday we sit down and we look at the past week to identify if all objectives were met, so on and so forth. So it's really not that complicated in that regard. And then I think I was mentioning again the structure when it comes to government, that with government we have your ministers, different ministers for different sectors, and the ministers have your right, we would call your right hand men or women, which in South Africa we have principal secretaries, and as well as in Lesotho, I don't know in your countries what you call them. And then we have government secretaries as well that ensure and take in minutes, so on and so forth. Also, I would also want for us to take a look at the African Union Agenda 2063. This is again in accord to the accountability structure. because when you look at the going back, if we look at the National Development Plan, I believe that almost all African countries have a national development plan whereby different objectives are stated, or different objectives need to be met in different societies, provinces, so on and so forth. So the whole point with the accountability structure is just that framework where all roles are defined clearly and responsibilities are defined clearly, understood, and can well be executed. And then moving on, we now go into AI and public experiences. Now, I mentioned again, I think when I started the presentation, I did ask how many of you have interact with public services, how many of you use health in terms of healthcare, how many of you go to public hospitals or clinics, and how many of you know people that go to public schools in terms of education? So the whole point of having or incorporating AI in public experiences, it's because I think we all may testify with the challenges that are in public services, especially in the healthcare, because we're looking at time management. You take a lot of time before you consult with a doctor, because you may find that there's an inadequate number of professional personnel on the ground. Like, for instance, I know that usually you'd find that there's 2 or 3 nurses and there's one doctor that has to consult with every other patient that's there. And remember, we're not talking about just 5 patients. We're talking about 10 plus patients who go to, and more, who go to public hospitals to get services, to check their health, to go to fill up the meds, so on and so forth. So imagine having one doctor facilitate, and in a day, imagine having one doctor consulting for 50 plus 50 plus individuals. That's a lot of work. That's a call for burnout, and that's a call for some mistakes may take place, because when the nurses, because before you see the doctor, you go through a nurse who's going to take your records, and then as well as your vitals. So imagine going through and working with 50 people, and keep and still up to tea with your mental capacity. I think that's just a lot. But but incorporating an AI generated systems, it means that workflow can be more smoother, and workflow can be more attainable, if I can use that word. And we know that AI generated systems can create more personalized, responsive, and engaging in public experiences. For instance, you have your chatbots, you have your virtual assistants, and recommendation into engines that governments can incorporate in their systems, whereby they know that they can be connected with the public inquiries 24/7. And this is especially, again, I'll go back to the healthcare, given the sensitivity of it, that you never know when you're going to get sick. And if you have kids like myself, you know that kids are very sensitive. You never know. You always you can't say my kid would never fall sick today, or you just never know. But when you know that there's a service that's available 24/7, whereby you can put in your inquiries and book your appointment with the doctor, then I think that would make for a good experience going forward. And then moving on, we look at data. We talk a lot about data. Data is the fuel for artificial intelligence, because without data, artificial intelligence, AI systems can't really generate. So when we look at data, again, as a result, public services collect and analyze vast amounts of information. And part of the information that public services, when you go to a public service, that they collect is your basic general information: name, place of birth, age, your geographical or demographical categories, so on and so forth. And also remember, we also have, when we look at data, and we also have your sensitive data, and this is usually, again, going back to the healthcare sector, whereby you'd need to disclose your medical history. And that in data protection, it's called sensitive information. But with AI, again, we know that the AI strategies can allow your government to make smarter decisions and uncover hidden insights and innovate faster than ever before. And again, I want to stress that this is not to, this with the AI systems, it's not to take away from, it's not to take away any human jobs. I think we'll get into that, where we cut down, where we talk about the misconceptions that circulate around what AI is and what it can and cannot do. But I'll go through that later on. Khosi, while I continue, may I just confirm if you can still see my screen?
Yes, yes, yes. Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. So let's look at the challenges in implementing artificial intelligence. I did mention about data, because given the amounts of data AI needs to generate or needs to use. So again, data privacy risks, especially when we talk of handling sensitive information. And the sensitive information I've mentioned, just going back and using the healthcare sector as your medical information. And we also know that in terms of that, we have your DNA, genetics, so on and so forth. So those are sensitive information. And if you were to give your such information to a chat, to an AI generated system, such as a chatbot or a virtual assistant, then privacy is definitely going to be your concern. And then we look at bias and algorithms. Bias and algorithms, again, go back to where we now look at look at, for instance, uh, is the information that the AI system is generating, is it fair? Is it accurate? And in terms of, again, looking at public services, for instance, let's look at your educational sector, your public schools. Public schools usually, not all, but usually cater for your zero to low income workers or families, because they're usually free of charge. So that means that your child or your children get free education, and it comes with its own complications again. So imagine if you have an AI system in a public school, and already the bias would come from, if you need to perhaps compare, or you need to look for recommendations. If ever it picks up or starts stating that you come from a low income family, and then only realizing that you may not, your parents just chose for you to go to a public school, then that's going to be a problem, because already it's now trained on that information, that on that data, that people who normally attend public schools come from low to zero, come from zero to low income families. So I don't know if you guys understand that part, but that's me trying to explain it in the most relevant and relatable aspect of this, to understand the bias in algorithms. And then we have the high costs. Obviously, we know that AI systems are not cheap, they're very expensive. So for a government to implement and use an AI generated system, we know that it's going to need a lot of money, and I think Ravin would gladly go into details in terms of high cost, because we know that government, in terms of the services, the public services they provide, we look at your tax, we look at your going to your World Bank, going to your African banks, so on and so forth. I don't want to get into details on that, but um, we do know that AI systems are expensive, and for a government or a public service such as the education sector, having AI systems in public schools, it would mean that the public school would need to have a model that it's going to use to maintain the system, and to ensure that the system is trained on correct and accurate data. And going back, AI in decision making. Now, again, remember, like I think I mentioned it in my presentation, that we need to understand the functions that AI can play in for instance in public services. So AI can also be used in decision support, decision making, whereby, for instance, we look at your challenges in the healthcare system, we look at challenges in the educational system, we look at challenges in the transport system. So when we have incorporated AI in the decision making, it means that when it comes to making decisions, decisions are faster and more accurate, and we use predictive modeling and real-time dashboards that are becoming essential in identifying public shifts, public behaviors, and operational bottlenecks. Again, just to stay on this point in terms of AI and decision making, we also need to understand that it's not to say that you don't have a role that you play when it comes to decision making. I think we need to look at decision making from a point of view whereby we're just looking to enhance our creativity, to enhance our problem solving skills, and as well as look at it from an innovative and creative perspective, so that we know that with the decisions that we make, they are relatable and relevant to the public we are serving as government. And then looking at building a public service AI strategy. So for governments to succeed with AI, government needs to develop a clear strategy. I think I don't know how many of you are aware that not not I don't know if any of you are aware of that. Not every problem can be solved by AI. I think that's the biggest thing. We need to understand what it can and cannot do. And we also need to look at the life circle. That's when we go back to the life circle of artificial intelligence. Because before we set up an AI system or on AI generated systems, we need to ask ourselves the why. Why do we need it? And can it really be solved using AI? And once you answer those questions, it means that you'll be able to get a more clear, you'll be able to create and develop a more clear strategy, because the strategy that you're going to create is the strategy that you're going to use in building up and achieving the different objectives and goals that you would have set. And again, it also ensures that you're investing in the right talent and tools, ensuring ethical practices, and continuously adapting to technological advances. So, like I've been mentioning, that when it comes to public services, it's really important for government personnel or government in general to really understand what it is that they're going to what it is they're going to use in terms of incorporating AI in their systems. And we also know that we when it comes to public services, because of the high cost, challenges can be met. But again, when you look at how other countries have started to automate some services whereby people can can send in inquiries from the comfort of their homes, and other automated services are AI generated. For instance, when we look at public safety, which is something I didn't go in depth with. When we look at public safety, that's law enforcement. Currently, there's a promotion, or that the incorporation of intensively using biometrics, where and we're looking at your facial recognition. So for just to give you an example, so in South Africa, the Border Management Authority uses drones as a way to try and minimize illegal entries into the country. And the drones, obviously, we need to understand that they use facial recognition to actually identify, to accurately identify who you are. And also, and I think that is one of the functions that government can start using. I don't know I don't know in your specific countries when it comes to the rate of crime, how the law enforcement in your countries are using AI to try and minimize crime. But we can share that in the group, and I believe that Bravin would also go into depth regarding that. But like I've mentioned, it's really important for us to know the why and the what, and if whether or not whatever problem we're trying to solve can be achieved by AI. Some of, just before I end, some of the misconceptions that we see happening around revolving around AI is that AI is about to achieve human level intelligence, or AI will eliminate all jobs, or AI can understand and feel emotions, so, or AI develops autonomously and can think and learn on its own. Those are some of the misconceptions, and to clear up those misconceptions, it's important to understand that while AI might excel at specific tasks, including complex ones, it lacks the general intelligence and capabilities of humans. And going back into the healthcare system, we've realized that in some countries that AI is being used to help that AI is being used to help in diagnosing diseases, recommending treatments, and managing patient records. And we also need to look at people who use wearable devices that help monitor health metrics and individual well-being. So there are a lot of different categories or different sectors that AI can play, especially in the public service, because when we talk of public services, we're talking of the community. We're talking of your people in the rural areas or your marginalized communities. When they're looking for services, they go to the public services. And we know that even in some working groups, some people still prefer to go to public services instead of going private. So I believe that this is a conversation that needs to be that we need to continue having, especially when you in our different countries. And I think you can more or less have an in-depth understanding if you go back to your government and go to public service sectors that I've mentioned, and get to understand if whether or not they have incorporated the use of AI. Because again, I believe that in order for us to really understand the role AI plays in our daily lives, including in public service, we need to engage with the relevant departments. We need to engage with the relevant stakeholders. And for this one, government is your best shot, because like I've mentioned in my first in the start of my presentation, that this is public services are essential services that government provides for the citizens, for the communities. And again, one last thing that I need to also talk about is when you look at the different government departments, we also have your local department. Local department has your municipalities. And remember, municipalities, part of the roles and responsibilities they have is to ensure that there's clean water for everyone in the communities. There's basic human needs are met for every citizen or every community member. So if we can start referencing, or if we can start looking at public services in the real, practical, and relatable manner, then it would be easy for us to understand and see and even see the gaps of how AI can be incorporated to increase efficiency, to increase productivity, to promote wellness, to promote openness and transparency. Because again, we also need to understand that because of the data that AI needs to use, it has to be data that reflects the day-to-day realities of every community member. I am so sorry, guys, for the glitch that happened earlier, but I hope that most of you have grasped what I've been talking about, and this is the end of my presentation. I'd like for us to engage more, and if ever you have questions, then I'm more than happy to take them. Thank you, Josie. Thank you, Kingsley.